Thank you so much.
Well, welcome everybody tonight. My name is Barbara Amstutz, and I'm a member of the board for the Southwest Harbor Public Library. We're very glad to have you here tonight with us. In advance of an event which you may be interested, we are holding on May 6th a special hybrid event with Jill Goldthwaite and Carolyn Ball, who will share insights on how state government works and how you can get involved. Tonight's event is being recorded, and Kate will be facilitating questions from our online audience at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to use the chat feature. These are to our remote listeners. We are pleased to welcome David Lamon, Director of Northern Operations for Maine Audubon. As a College of the Atlantic graduate and the former executive director of the Somes Minell Wildlife Sanctuary for over 15 years, David knows Mount Desert Island and its bird life, and he's here to share a lot of knowledge with us tonight. Our home landscape offers an excellent opportunity to engage in the natural world. David's talk tonight will introduce us to the techniques to create a bird-friendly habitat for attracting and supporting birds through all the seasons. Let's give David a warm welcome.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. You know more about me than I know about myself. Where did I put that? It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. So thanks for coming out, everybody. It's great to be here in the library, in Southwest Harbor Library, and I have not been in this library probably in about 8 years, believe it or not. So it's nice to be back here. And just make sure this little clicker is working. As was mentioned, I do now work for Maine Audubon, and I'm looking at the screen. Does everybody see that little thing?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, what is that? It's a tech question.
One of the zoomers.
Oh.
But it's not on this screen now.
Fun. Let's see here.
That might be kind of annoying after a while. Right?
It's the camera.
Here, get it back over here. Oh, I know, it migrated to that screen. Okay, let's just minimize that entirely. Yes, no?
That's good, yes.
Okay.
Hand for the tech. It's wonderful to not have to deal with the tech on top of her together, so thank you. So yes, Maine Audubon, maybe some of you sitting here are members of Maine Audubon, and if you're not, I'd love to just nudge you to become a member. We are a statewide organization dedicated to education, conservation, and advocacy on behalf of Maine's wildlife. If you do become a member, you will get Habitat Magazine, which comes out quarterly. That's one of many perks that you get as a member, but you also get the good feeling that comes from supporting a state-based conservation organization that works on behalf of Maine's wildlife. So we are Maine's oldest and largest Maine-based organization, and we do operate 8 sanctuaries around the state. Honestly, most of those you can see are clustered in the southern part of the state. My title or moniker of Northern Programs is basically there from there above, which leaves Fields Pond and Boardstone under my domain there. And my office is actually here, right there, in that little window that I look out of at the Fields Pond Center. And this is the bird's eye view. And the reason that I'm showing this slide is that we are kind of focused on birds in a way, and birds specifically in our home landscapes. And I like showing this slide because, you know, Fields Pond has, if you go on to eBird and look up Fields Pond, you'll see there's 169 species that have been recorded here. We're not at the top of the hotspot list, but we're like in the maybe top 30 in the state. So we get a decent amount of bird traffic there. And one of the reasons is diversity of habitat. I mean, this isn't showing all of our 260 acres. The property goes up this way and down that way, but you can see just from this little bit that we have open field habitat. We've got forested with deciduous forest, and then more old growth coniferous, and then we have wetland areas. So it's a lot of diversity there for a fairly small area, which attracts a lot of different species of birds. And I wanted you to keep that in mind as we proceed tonight, because that's kind of the model of what we're trying to do at our home landscape, is to kind of basically mimic nature as much as we can in terms of the diversity. You know, if you think about, sorry about, if you think about like a suburban or urban home and the home landscape, people think of doing landscaping around home in places where it's going to have a lot of lawn, right? And it's going to have non-native shrubs and perennials, and our homes typically have a lot of glass. So these are kind of like the antithesis of what birds need. So this is like the model of what we don't want, right? Something maybe a little more in lines with what we do want, is that something that's modeling a little more of a natural landscape, right? That's something that where you're minimizing the open lawn area, and you have some water source perhaps in there, and you've got different layers. You've got upper story, mid-story, and lower story going on. So that's kind of where we're heading with this idea of bringing nature home to our home landscapes. So why should we care about doing this in our home landscapes? You might care because you might be like this person in the cartoon, that you're a birder, that you get jazzed about seeing birds, but that may not be you too. Maybe there's some, I'm assuming that most people are here because they're interested in birds, and most people that are zooming in are interested in birds. But if you're not interested in birds, you should still care, right? Birds play critical roles in the habitat, in our ecosystems. They're benefits to both nature and us as humans. The pollinators, seed dispersers, pest controllers. They help with keeping our plant populations healthy. They're indicators of environmental health. We've all heard the thing canary in the coal mine, right? So birds are really good things to have around, is basically the point I wanted to make. And speaking of having birds around, those of you that are birders know that we're just entering, or we have entered, and we're on the upslope now of spring migration. Most of Maine's bird species, Maine has, so don't quote me on this, but it's probably around 470 recorded bird species in the state of Maine, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And again, don't quote me in numbers, probably about 300 of those are migratory birds. So a lot of the birds that pass through our landscape or call our landscape home are here for just part of the year, as some of us might be too, right? So, but this little map from Cornell Lab of Ornithology just shows the peak migration here. Looking at, we're coming up here in New England area very soon to peak bird migration, which is one of my favorite times of the year, because I do love getting out with binoculars and doing a lot of birding, and as many of the people here on Mount Desert Island do as well. And I'll just make a plug for, as you guys have a great opportunity for birding with the Katy Birding Festival coming up at the end of May, which is always a great opportunity. But it's if you think, getting back to the person, maybe not that cartoon that I showed with the binoculars around the neck person, but the person that is just maybe a little more oblivious to birds. One of the things that person might be oblivious to the fact is, during peak migration, each evening as birds are migrating, because most of these birds are migrating at nighttime, there could be up to 500 million birds moving across the New England landscape at any one time, at any one night during peak migration. That is a lot of wildlife. So if you think about, I remember when I was a kid, I used to love nature shows, and you would see these great, the wildebeest migrating across the African plains or other things. This is like a migration that is just, it boggles the imagination, the amount of birds that are moving through the landscape each night. One bird that has been moving that I've been seeing the last few weeks is this fellow here. Let me see if this works with this clicker here. This is a tree swallow, and yes, this is going to show. This is a radar of this species moving, and basically it's looking at the abundance each week during spring, and then it goes back and shows you the fall migration. So, and the neat thing, you can do this, if you go to Cornell Lab of Ornithology, they have this thing called Birdcast. So during I visit this a lot during migration season, and you could look each night how many birds were moving. They can do an estimate based on the radar that they use, and you can see how many birds were moving across the landscape. So if it was a good night, basically a good night for migratory birds, then that next day or two is a great day to get out and do some birding and see what just showed up on the landscape that's new. So it's a great tool to use if you're into birding. So it begs the question, why do the birds go to the trouble of making these massive migrations, right? They're basically coming up here to do this. This is another tree swallow over the Fields Pond Sanctuary. We have lots of tree swallows there. And they're here to reproduce and raise babies and continue their lineage on the landscape. And they're here because if you think about our landscape, Maine offers them a lot of available habitat, and with that is the food that they need to feed their babies. And that food is mostly in the form of this. This is a brown-hooded owlet caterpillar. And this caterpillar has a relationship with our native asters and goldenrods, and that's its host plants. But it is utilized as food for baby birds. If you think about a little bird like a chickadee, okay, a chickadee weighs about as much as of a quarter. Like if you had a quarter in your hand, 25 cents, that's about how much a chickadee weighs. So if you can think about how much a chick might weigh, it's even less than that. For a chickadee to raise its brooded chicks, it's going to need between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars. That's a lot of caterpillars. That's a lot of, yeah. So hungry mouths, right? So that's why these birds are here, because of the insect population. And those insect populations are dependent on our native plants because, like I said in the slide before that, a lot of these insects are specific. They have specific host plants that they need as part of their life cycle. So this blue-headed vireo that's here to, raise its chicks, it needs food to do that, right? So even bird species that are traditionally eating just seeds and nuts, they're still going to raise their babies on high protein insects to get them started and off to the right, on the right foot in life. So and these little birds, they basically they have to gain a lot of weight, and to be able to fledge, and they need the food to do that. So again, this is just another reinforcement of why Maine, right? So Maine, we have one of the most important areas. If you can see, in the eastern seaboard here, we are the most important area here. We're what's considered significant IBA, which stands for important bird area. That's true. That's what IBA stands for, and it's a National Audubon uses that as a designated label for different areas. So these are the important bird areas along the eastern seaboard, and you can see Maine is loaded with that. So the Maine forest, obviously, and that's one of the reasons that almost over 80% of our landscape in Maine is forested, and no other state can say that. And that's why we have such a diversity of species that are coming here, which is great in terms of bird migration. Like I said, we have out of the 470 species, give or take, that we have in Maine, you've got probably roughly around 300 of those that are migratory. So that brings me to the kind of big part of tonight's talk, which is our program called Bringing Nature Home. Maine Audubon started this program a number of years ago. Probably it's been about 6 or 7 years, don't quote me on that, but it's been a little while that we started this program called Bringing Nature Home, which is basically an educational marketplace for native plants. And part of that is to do what I'm doing here this evening, is making that connection for people between native plants in the landscape and the wildlife that depends on them and the importance of that. Now, this isn't we didn't start this work out of nothing. This is work that some of you may be familiar with this book. If you're not, this is a great book, Bringing Nature Home, by Tallamy. Sorry, it's cut off there at the bottom. But he's got a couple of versions. Actually, this is the original book, but now there is a version. He did a version for young people, which is really cool. If you're not, it's kind of a dense book. So if you're like me and you want a kind of bedtime reading, get the version that he did for younger people. I mean, when I say younger people, it's not like elementary school. It's more like youth. Think about youth. I think it's a great way to introduce that he does to introduce this whole concept of how our home landscapes can really play a big role in conservation of species. I mean, we tend to think about, you know, the role in terms of wildlife conservation, the role like, you know, land protection, which is very important, but we all live on land as well. And the more we can cohabitate and live on that land in a way that we can better coexist with the wildlife around us, that has a huge impact. So let's get back to our topic for tonight, is creating bird-friendly habitat on our home landscapes. So the first part of that is plant selection. And the big part of that, the big message there is we're going to choose native plants, if at all possible. Now, I'm not going to stand here tonight saying that you should rip out every non-native plant on your property. That's something I think, you know, I'm a homeowner too, and over the years, I've slowly been transforming my landscape. Of course, the invasive plants I got rid of first because of the fact that they're very aggressive and they crowd out other things. But slow transformation, I think, is totally appropriate for the landscape. And let me back up and start with a definition that we all can agree on what a native plant actually is. So I'm using this definition from NWF, which says that if it's occurred naturally in a particular region, ecosystem, or habitat without human introduction, we're considering it native. This is a quick fun fact. Over 90% of Maine's songbirds are relying on these native plants to feed their young, yet people that go to buy nursery plants, less than 5% of those sales are actually native plants. Now, you know, I have to say, when I was younger, a young teenager, I first got involved in, well, I was always interested in the environment, but I got involved in gardening as a young teenager, and I convinced my mom that out back I needed to plant a garden, and we had just torn the pool. We didn't have a pool anymore, so I used the area the pool was. So I planted a garden the first year. I remember growing eggplants. I was so proud of them. I would give eggplants away to people in the neighborhood. And you know, then from gardening, it kind of grew. I got involved in landscaping, and I convinced my mom that can I landscape our front lawn. I didn't know anything about what was native or not. I just went to the nursery and like, I like this. That looks cool. I want that. It was like I wanted to make it look like this, which is totally fine. I mean, it got me heading down a path, right, and interested in that. But I think what we're doing now is changing the mindset of, you know, what we can actually do and the impact that we can have in our native landscape. So that just the simple act of planting a native plant in your yard can have a dramatic impact on the health and well-being of local bird populations. So let me just talk about some resources that I didn't have when I was a young teenager. So this is one site I like called Go Botany, and that is the Native Plant Trust runs that, and you could find that. It's you type in different species and you find out all about them. So that's a resource I like to use. Another one is this one from National Wildlife Foundation. They have a whole thing with you know, with native plants, and down this you can see they're showing a number of caterpillar species that use this plant as a host. You can see, look at that one, 436, that white and black oak. That's amazing. And then a number of pollen specialists, bees, that rely on this plant, which is kind of cool to see as well. And then there's Maine Audubon. We've got a site too. So you could go to our native plant finder, and the native plant finder, when you get there, if you look all the way on that side of the screen, you basically see, you can type in at the top here, they've got several things that you could do. You could type in if you want something blooming in August, or you'd like something early June, so you get the month of the bloom, whether you had a sunny spot or a shady spot. What's your soil type? You know, is it a wet soil? Is it a dry soil? Is it an acidic soil? Size and height of the plant and its benefits to wildlife, and it gives you an array of plants that might fit that bill. And then actually, to go a step further, you can then order those plants right online and pick them up at Fields Pond or at Gilson Farm down in Falmouth. I know we're not down there, but we do that. Gilson Farm is where we raise a lot of these plants, these natives, but they bring them up to Fields Pond, which is outside of Brewer where I work. And usually the pickup is once or twice a month on a Friday. But you don't have to go on a Friday. Your plants will be delivered that Friday, and you can pick them up anytime after that. So that's another resource. Not here to plug or sell plants to you all, but I'm just letting you know that exists, and it's a neat thing. Even if you just use the website to, like I said, look at the selection criteria that I went through already in that. Okay, so. Another thing to consider in terms of plant selection is also, as we're trying to mimic nature here, is to have different layers, right? If you have a stand of trees that's all the same age, not really diverse, you know, you're going to limit the number of species that can take advantage of that. So it's good to have a variety of layers and heights in your home landscape. Different birds make use of these different heights and landscapes. If you think about something like an ovenbird, they'll nest toward the ground in a forest, whereas you have something like a scarlet tanager, which is up higher in the tree canopy. It's all about diversity. This happens to be, actually, this little schematic here comes from a project that Maine Audubon does called Forestry for Maine Birds, which works with landowners and foresters on managing your woodlots that will encourage diversity among species. And actually, we've picked the 20 species that you can see pictures of here. We picked those as indicator species because they're more threatened species and species of concern in the state. So working with foresters and landowners in terms of having more diversity in their woodlot will help those species. So the next part I want to do is think about, we talked about layers, right? So we have our trees up top, and then your shrubs are kind of in the middle part, and then you've got your perennials, which is, you know, maybe here down, and then you've got your ground cover down below. So let's kind of go build up from the bottom and go up from there, and I'll talk about some plants. So the bottom I like to think about as like this idea of green mulch, right? Instead of using, you know, going to the store and buying mulch, think about how much of your ground can you cover with plants. So you have a natural, that's the mulch basically. So, and I'm not, when I say plants, I'm kind of excluding turf and like lawn, like, so we're not making golf courses here, right? So having a little bit of lawn, that's okay, but like you want to try and minimize your lawn. So at my home, I put in actually early on one side of my house, a lot of wild strawberry. Now it's all totally covered, and I don't even need to mow it anymore because the grass doesn't come up through it. And this is a great plant. So it's beautiful. It's edible, right? It's edible to both me and the birds. I can't tell you how many times I've seen cardinals. This is so sweet. You see, like the male cardinal will go down and get a little strawberry and fly up on a shrub that's a higher perch and feed it to his mate. Very nice to see that, right? Wouldn't have that moment if I hadn't planted the strawberries there. So also the deer pretty much leave them. I do have deer, even though I live pretty much in downtown Ellsworth. I do have deer that go through my lawn. They don't eat the leaves. I guess they don't like the leaves. And then this plant will host between 10 and 100 different caterpillar species. So good one to have. Another ground cover, this is something I just started putting in a couple years back, is called foam flower. It's a great ground cover in shady areas. Flowers are, you can see this white foamy like flower. The leaves are these kind of heart-shaped, low to the ground, growing very thick around each other. They kind of have this variegated vein pattern, which is neat to look at too. So I think it's a really beautiful plant. Again, it is a host plant for different caterpillars. From 1 to 10 different caterpillar species will make use of that plant. Okay, so moving up from the ground up a little bit, now we've got our perennials and grasses. So I talked about grasses, like no long grasses. So let's think about our native grasses for a second. So this one is little blue stem, which is really beautiful. It does have this slide isn't doing it justice, but it's kind of got a blue hue to it. And then as the season goes on, it gets a little more reddish, purple, burgundy kind of color in the fall. And then the seed up here with the tufts where the seeds, when they open up, which are also edible for birds, by the way, the little white tufts will be kind of, you'll have these little white floaty things around, which is also really beautiful too. It's very clumpy. It's good at holding down your soil. So if you had, especially like if there's a slope area you're trying to prevent erosion, this is a great plant to have. And again, 1 to 10 caterpillar species are supported by this plant.
What's it called again?
That was little blue stem. So Scoparium is a species of this plant. So if that's everybody calls it knows it by little blue stem. So yeah. It's another plant we have at the Audubon Sanctuary where I work at Fields Pond is wild bergamot, and this is a neat one to have around because it will attract the hummingbirds. So when this is out, the hummingbirds are right on it. They're right on it and they know when it's there. This one is another great host for caterpillars for larval moths and butterflies will make use of this. From 10 to 100 species will be able to make use of this, and also bees. You can see bee in that picture. Is there a bee in that picture somewhere? Yeah. All right.
There's your bee.
There's my bee. Okay. Yeah.
Big butt.
Yeah. Asters, or if we live here on the island, you can't miss asters in the fall. This is our fall wildflower right around here. Maine has over 20 different species of asters, and some are for the home landscape or a little more showy than others. So it does, doing some research is worth it. I'm not sure of exactly what the species that we're looking at, probably a New England aster, but the thing I do want to point out is those are monarch butterflies on there. Monarch butterflies really love this plant. A lot of people think, well, monarch butterflies, they're just a milkweed. Well, that the milkweed is where they will lay their eggs for their caterpillars once they hatch out of the eggs to feed off of. But when they're adults, once the caterpillars go through they form their chrysalis and then they emerge into their adult stage of their life cycle. They'll feed on a number of plants that have nectar, and this is a major one for them because it's right in the time that they're out and about. So again, great host plant, not for many different caterpillars, from 10 to up to 100 caterpillars different species will rely on this plant.
Do you mind? We have a request from the audience if you could name the botanical Latin names if you know them as well.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I will do it. I will do it as much as I can. I may not, and if I would invite the audience to as well, and folks who are online who want to type it in the chat, absolutely go for it.
That's Nova Islandica. That's the species.
Of
Aster.
the aster. Okay, great.
Okay.
So
This is a test.
The genus is the genus Symphotrichum or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, we're gonna stumble over our Latin here tonight, probably. I don't know. But goldenrods, another there's at least, I don't know, a dozen or more. I would say probably between a dozen and 20 species of goldenrods in Maine. Thinking about the monarchs, they love this plant as well. A lot of people think goldenrod, bad plant, it causes allergies, but not just because when it's in bloom, ragweed's in bloom at the same time. So it's the ragweed that's actually bothering your allergies, not the goldenrods. If you want to make friends with goldenrods, we have a program in August at Fields Pond, a goldenrod walk. We have a lot of goldenrods in our field. We've got about a dozen species there. So if you want to get familiar with some of the goldenrods, join us in August. So this is this plant can actually host up to 200 different species of caterpillars. So it's a great, again, in terms of diversity, this is a heavy hitter here. So we all know red flowers in our gardens attract what? They attract this guy, hummingbirds, right? So if you want hummingbirds around, not just I showed the wild bergamot before, but they'll feed from things that aren't red, but they love red flowers. So this slide is showing some columbine. I think the species over there is canadensis, and then of course this is a Lobelia cardinalis, which is a cardinal flower. And you've got both of these things that occurred here wild on Mount Desert Island. If you want to see some really nice cardinal flower, go to Soames Brook in the middle of the summer and walk along the brook up in where the cemetery, if you go into the Soamesville Cemetery, Brookside Cemetery, sorry, no, I know it is. People call it Soamesville Cemetery. It's the Brookside Cemetery. Walk up along the brook, and once it curves around the bend, there's a nice healthy stand of cardinal flower in there.
Poison ivy.
Oh, be careful the poison ivy. Okay. So
Thank you.
yeah. So again, we talked about hummingbirds. The columbine also. Deer do not eat that flower because they don't like it. So it's deer resistant. The cardinalis, this one right here is something that likes to be wet. I mentioned the brook running out of Soames Pond there by the cemetery. This plant is growing right in the water there. So it doesn't have to be growing right in the water, but if you're in soil, it has to be pretty wet soil to make it happen. All right. There's our friend the hummingbird.
We have a hand.
A hands up.
Okay. Nancy. Okay, why don't you go ahead and finish and then we'll take the questions.
Well, I'm about to go up to the shrubs, the middle story, moving from the under,
Yeah,
So-
why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay,
and take the
great.
questions.
Okay. So Vaccinium genus. Okay, we have a number of species in that genus that grow wild here in Maine. I'm not gonna be able to rattle them all off, but I will mention that because I'm talking about shrubs now, high bush blueberry, which is Corybossum, I think. Help me out. Is that the gene? That's the species of this one, I think. Yeah. This guy will host 290 caterpillar species. So green commas, clear wings, lace borders, tussock moths, apple sphinx, their caterpillars love this plant. So I love this plant. I have this plant growing outside my office door at Fields Pond, and I do occasionally will steal a blueberry, but I really restrain myself because I love watching the birds feed from this. It's so funny because with the higher bush ones, the berries are pretty big, right? And watching them shove those through their mouth is a lot of fun. So it's worth the entertainment to put one of these in your home landscape. Another beautiful one that we have, you just driving around the roadsides in the fall on MDI, you can't miss this one, is the bright red berries. This is the winter berry.
It's a lot of.
Thank you. Versicolata. Ilex is the genus, right? Yep. Good. So this is a great one. The brilliant red berries, they'll last through the winter if they don't get eaten by the birds. This thing can host up to 100 different species of insect hosts. So a good one to have in your landscape.
That's the female that needs a boy.
Yes. Yeah.
It needs a male plant near it, somewhere near it.
somewhere near it, yeah,
Only the female has the berries.
yeah.
But one boy can do a whole bunch of.
Can do multiple duties, yeah. So, yeah. Strange how that works. Dogwoods, this is a picture, I believe this is a pagoda dogwood.
Cornice.
Cornice is the genus, yeah. So, this thing will grow up to 15 feet tall. And I think they're beautiful. They're flower in the spring. It's to me, it's one of the signs of spring too. Again, this thing is great, a great host plant, over 100 different species of caterpillars and moths. We'll call this host. The berries are great for birds. Different mammals will eat the berries as well, so it's a nice plant to have around. Another nice plant to have around. Everybody knows this one. You could just walk right down here on the paths by the shoreline here in Southwest Harbor and find this is bayberry. Yeah. So this is northern bayberry, Pennsylvania. Yeah, Morella pennsylvanica. Pennsylvanica, I think is the species. So gorgeous shrub, very thick, right? And then it gets the berries, right? Those waxy hard berries. And a lot of bird species rely on those as a food source, believe it or not. I love, if I'm walking and hiking along the shoreline, I'll take one and just one, because they put a lot of berries out. I'll just take one and then I'll put my nail into it, and just that intense smell of bayberry is just, you can rub your fingers on the leaves and get that smell as well. But if you take the berry and you kind of crush in your fingers, it's really potent. So love that plant. Yeah, woodpeckers will eat, though I've seen them eat off of that, chickadees, bluebirds, warblers. Yeah, so yeah, great plant to have around. Another plant that is another one of my favorite spring plants, I've got this in my side yard, is a serviceberry or shadbush.
Emmelanchier.
Great, say that again.
Emmelanchier.
Emmelanchier
We have
is the genus.
native species.
All right,
Genus is Emmelanchier,
yeah,
and then there are two. That's why the colors are like a variation that
of
you
different.
see on the hillside.
Yeah, yeah. So when this is one of the early bloomers in terms of the taller stuff, in terms of shrub/tree. And the other common name of shadbush came from the fact that when the shad which is a diatomous fish, running in the springtime, these would be in bloom. So that's where it got its nickname shadbush. So if you see this in bloom, you can know the alewives are running. So it's all good, right? So okay, so let's move up to the overstory now. Moving up here. So I wanted to start with oaks. So red and white oak. Oaks are gorgeous trees. I mean, if you burn wood as heat, oak is a great wood to burn. It's a very dense hardwood, but it's an important tree in the landscape. Over 200 caterpillar species can call this tree host, so it's a great one to have. Yeah, it's definitely what I would call like a keystone species in the landscape. The oaks, and it's great for wildlife as well. Willows right now, if you have willows on your property, they like to be in wet areas. Obviously, we've got them all over at Fields Pond. Right now you'll see the fuzzy catkins. So willows are very fast growing. So if you put a willow in that's this tall, next year it's gonna be this tall. It's pretty quick growing. Birds love hanging out in the willows. Porcupines like hanging out in willow trees as well. I see porcupines in our willow trees a lot. Yeah, so this is a picture of it. I don't have a full picture, but you can see it gets, you can get up to 20 feet on a willow tree. It can support over 200 species of host caterpillars. So a great tree in our landscape. Another genus is Prunus, which would be our native cherry and plums. And this is a black cherry here, and this is one of our largest of our cherry trees. And you see the beautiful blooms in the springtime here. The bees will come out for those. Yeah, and again, this is another powerhouse. Over 200 species of caterpillars can be this plant can host. So, anyone got the Latin for the cherry now?
I didn't look it up, sorry.
Yeah, well, we know the genus is Prunus something, right? So let's just call it Prunus. Yeah, so
What's
this is,
the technical term? Prunus something.
yeah. So the other Prunus that I was gonna show was the beach plum, and this is the tree, showing you the tree. It's not necessarily that tall. It's a great one to have in the landscape. People do use, well, people can also make use of the fruit, making jam out of that. But obviously the birds would love it as well, and other wildlife would love that. It's very salt and drought resistant as well. You can see it growing right along this roadside here. Thinking of salt, road salts that go down. Yeah, so this is another powerhouse. Over 200 species of caterpillars are able to use this as a host plant. Evergreens, so again, thinking of our tall stuff. And here's the cedar waxwing. We were talking about those other berries earlier, but this guy is on its eating eastern red cedar. So this is the eastern red cedar, which is not technically, it's technically a juniper. So its genus is Juniperus. I think Virginiana is the species of the eastern red cedar, and this can get up to 30 feet tall, host 41 different species of caterpillars, and birds, not just cedar waxwings, but other birds will eat the berries as well. Another of our evergreens is one of my favorite, and we're talking about a really towering tree now. So if you had the room in your home landscape and you wanted an anchor tree to build stuff around, this is an eastern hemlock. I just know the species is canadensis. I don't know what the genus for hemlock. I should know that. If anybody knows what it is, let me know. Anyway, to me, this is the classic New England conifer. I love hemlocks, and they're so majestic. And again, another powerhouse. Up to 200 different species of caterpillars can call this plant its host. So a great one to have in the landscape. Cones obviously provide seeds to birds.
They do have a problem on MDI, however,
The woolly adelgid.
Yes, that one.
Okay, yeah,
So it's one of,
yeah.
it is such a wonderful tree, but it's one to plant would be prepared for.
Be prepared that you could lose it, right? If the adelgid is splitting. Yeah, I don't know much about how prevalent the adelgid is here on the island. I know it's here, but yeah,
It's getting more prevalent.
it's getting more prevalent. Yeah,
What is it?
it's an insect. It's a non-native insect that
Under, it eats the stuff under the bark.
yeah, it goes right into it, and you can actually tell if this one was infested. You would see these they look like tiny little white dots that would be right at the nub where the needle comes out of the woody parts.
It's woolly, it's cottony.
Yeah, and thus the name woolly adelgid. That's where they get that. Yeah, so
Is it spelled indulgent, whatever that word is you're pronouncing, how do you spell it?
ADEL.
GEID.
Adelgid. Yeah, I think that's it. Adelgid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Afterwards, it would have been really, I can help rechange related.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So if you just going back to earlier slides, specifically this slide, if you think about if you had a 20 by 20 area in your landscape, and that could support, you could have one large kind of what I would call an anchor tree, right, to get the high, and 3 to 9 smaller shrubs to get your median, and then your mix of ground covers and perennials to get the mid-low to low. And I think that would be a good kind of thumbnail when you're planning if you're thinking about that. And again, you may not start with a blank 20 by 20, like if you had this room, which is about 20 by 20. Most of us aren't starting with a blank canvas. We've already got stuff in there, so you can just think about the evolution of it over time, and just one or two things at a time, you can make some changes, right? So that's the basic structure in terms of making our home habitats, more bird friendly and wildlife friendly. This little arrow is pointing to the bird feeder that's empty up there. And I wanted to kind of now switch gears because people always ask me a lot about that in terms of, bird feeders. What should I be, a lot of in terms of attracting birds to your home landscape, a lot of people think the first thing they think of is not a native plant, but it's a bird feeder. I got to bring a bird feeder in, and that'll bring the birds there. Well, it may or it may not. But one question I get a lot of is like, do I need to feed the birds year round? And the answer is no. Birds can take care of themselves, right? As this woodpecker is showing itself to do. We don't need to feed birds. But if you do feed the birds, I do have some pointers for you, because we have 3 bird feeding stations at Fields Pond that I maintain. And the reason that we do them at the wildlife sanctuary at Fields Pond is that we bring the birds in closer to the building so people can see what birds are around, right? And of course, we're not going to bring all the birds that are on the landscape there, but some birds will come to them. So let's just talk a little bit about how to do that and what's involved, right? So what I feed birds, 90% of what I do is black oil sunflower. This is not an exhaustive list of what birds will feed off that. There are many other birds that will feed off of black oil sunflower seed, but I think it's the best. If you're going to ask my advice, and I'm just one person, I think it's the best all around. If you're going to go with one thing and you don't want to fuss too much, you can buy it in 40-pound bags, get a couple of those, you're set for a good long while. I do suggest you store it in a metal trash can, because if you have rodents around, they will find it. So not a plastic trash can, but a metal trash can. You can see I've learned this lesson. Cracked corn, some people, I've never fed cracked corn, but some people do. And you can see a lot of these birds are the same birds that showed up for the sunflower seeds as well. So maybe not the towhee, but
Deer will come.
Deer will come, yeah. And you don't really want to be feeding deer cracked corn, especially in the wintertime. It's not really good for their digestion, because their gut has undergone a transformation of bacteria that is now suited to digesting woody stuff, less nutritious stuff. And if you're feeding them corn, they're not a good combination.
They're eating the shrubs that you bought.
Yes, they'll eat the shrubs.
And my maple. They ate my maple.
They ate your maple?
My cherry.
Yeah, well, I talked about the Serviceberry having one in my side yard, and it took me a few years to figure this out, but it was this height for like 3 years. And I'm like, wow, that thing is slow growing. And I looked at it, like the last year I looked at it, and it was nipped by a deer. They were coming through the yard and they were keeping it at this height. So I just put some wire fencing around, and now it's like up to here. So all good.
The landscapers came through.
Yeah. Safflower, you can also, little more pricey than sunflower. But again, you can see some of these things are similar to the other list. Although, and I will say, indigo bunting was not on the other list, but I've had indigo buntings show up at our feeders at Fields Pond with the sunflower seed. So it works there too. Another thing that I do put out is suet. Because some birds will like the suet, particularly the woodpeckers there, and other bird species too. Bluebirds like the suet. We had bluebirds around all winter long at Fields Pond, and they would go for the suet. So yeah. So since we're talking about bird feed, let's talk about bird feeders. There's a lot of bird feeders out on the market that you can buy. I'll just tell you what I like to use. I like something that's open like this, that's more of what I call a tray feeder. So I like having an open tray with a cover, so it's not getting, if rain's coming down, it's not really getting wet, and there's cover here too. You can see there's some plexiglass there, and the birds can feed in here. I'm not crazy about having the suet feeders on the side. It just looks like more stuff to break. I would rather have the single hanging suet feeder. The other thing I like about, you can see these lids flip open. It's easy to fill. I like things that are easy to fill. When you flip them open, these plexiglass things slide out so you can clean it. And it's really important that if you're gonna feed birds and you're gonna put a bird feeder out, that you clean it at least every few weeks. So if you just have to grin and bear it, you have to clean that out because birds can spread diseases amongst each other. So the cleaner you can keep that, the better, and also keeping the area under the feeder clean. If you're feeding like I do, the black oil sunflower seeds, it is a job. You do have to rake up the holes that are gonna be left there every once in a while, or else, you know, you'll have 6 inches of sunflower holes there, and it's not, that can also not be good as well. So takes a little bit of maintenance. Again, you don't have to buy a fancy one, you can make your own. This is another just open feeder, just dump the feed right in, and you can see there's a cover over it. You can see that bunting there. And I've never seen a painted bunting at any of our feeders. I've only seen a painted bunting actually twice in my life, believe it. So it's not a common bird around here, so.
I had one about 5 years ago.
At your feeder?
Yeah.
Ah, you lucky.
It was there for a little over a day.
Nice. Yeah,
And Orioles.
yes, Oriole, yeah. So actually, I mentioned that the only feeder types I used were the suet and the seed, but when I know that Orioles are around, I will put fruit out for them so I can draw the Orioles in. So that's another thing, the Orioles love fruit or jelly, if you can put some jelly out. Yeah,
I sliced an orange in half and just nailed it to the tree.
that's perfect. That's simple. I love it. Just keep it simple, yeah. One thing that's not simple is this, tube feeders, really hard to clean. If you want to do it, go for it, but I don't like tube feeders. They're really hard to clean, and a lot of they sell the feeders that are like squirrel proof, that are tube, and they've got cages around them and stuff. You know, the squirrels just hang off up here and they go down and they get the feed. They figure it out.
I caught a squirrel in my tube feeder.
Poor guy.
Yeah. I took the top off and I shook it out over the railing and it ran away, but it was screeching.
Yeah.
No squirrels made that much noise. It lifted the lid and went.
And went into the tube. Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, I just feed the squirrel. This is my advice there are ways to design. It does take work, but there are ways to design stuff that is, quote, squirrel proof. My thing is, I don't deal with it at the Audubon Sanctuary. They come, they feed for like 30 minutes and then they go. And they might come back a second time in the day, 30 minutes, and then they're gone. And the rest of the time is birds. So they're not, they get their fill and then they go, is what I think.
Dump the seed and there's not enough for the birds.
They are messy feeders and they will dump a lot of seed, but woodpeckers do that too. If you ever watch a woodpecker at a feeder, it dumps it. I don't know why they do that. They're not ground feeders, but they just shovel it out and it's flying out of the thing. But anyway, the other thing I don't like about these feeders is that they're more likely to spread something like avian conjunctivitis, because if you think about it, if you're a finch, like that last slide was showing, you're sticking your head in there. And if you've got a bacterial infection on your eye or your face, like conjunctivitis, which is very contagious to birds, especially finch species, it's easy to spread in a feeder like a tube feeder, whereas a flat open feeder is not as likely to be able to be spread that way. So conjunctivitis can be actually deadly in birds, because what happens is, it's similar to human conjunctivitis in that you get an infection in your eye, right? We get antibiotic ointment and it's gone. They don't get an antibiotic ointment, right? So their eye gets so swollen and puffed that they can actually not feed themselves and they end up starving. So not a good way to go out.
How about sock feeders, the net?
So the ones that you're talking about that are like nets, they're for like thistle, things that can slide through those. Yeah, I don't feed thistle, but thistle's pretty expensive. But there are certain birds that definitely go for thistle. So I don't have experience using those. So I think they're fine though. Yeah.
If the bottom of your feeder is the wire,
Yeah.
do you still have to clean it every 2 weeks?
Not as much as if you had a flat, like a wood surface or something that things would stick to,
Yeah.
but you still do have to clean it. Like I clean the wire suet cages, I clean those out.
Okay.
So those are the messiest part, because the suet is basically fat and it gets all over everything. You have to let it soak in like dish detergent for a while and then scrub it and then let it dry, and yeah. So moving on from bird feeders. You can choose, like I said, birds are perfectly fine if you don't feed them. And if you have a good landscape and you have plants, you can just sit out in your yard, you will see birds. It's, you won't see them the way they come to a feeder, but you'll see them. Another thing you could put out in your landscape, your home landscape, is a place to roost. Roosting boxes or nesting boxes, a little chickadee in a roosting box here. So places that birds go for at night, especially in the wintertime, year-round birds like chickadees that are here year-round, they'll huddle in to small spaces to keep warm. So that's what I call a roosting box. You may want to put out nesting boxes. At the Audubon Sanctuary, we have dozens of bluebird boxes. If you have the right habitat, so bluebirds prefer open field habitat. And so if you have you want to keep some open area, you have open field, a bluebird box is a great idea. Also, other species will use these, like the tree swallows I showed earlier, will use these same boxes. Just make sure you mount them up like at least this high and have a little bit of a place that the bird can stand on. This is a great example of what bluebirds love to do. They like to be on top of the post, look around before they go in, make sure nobody's going to see them do their thing, right? So that's the male and that's the female. And they're out there now they're doing this behavior right now that you're looking at on this slide is what they're doing right now in nature. So another thing about if we're inviting birds in our home landscape, I talked about glass earlier with that suburban home. Glass is an issue with birds. Birds can't see glass if the light's in a certain direction. They will fly right through it or into it, thinking that they're flying through it. It's estimated that between 100 million and 1 billion birds die every year because of collisions with buildings and glass. It's just a fact of life. Maine Audubon has embraced this issue and started a project 3 years ago called Bird Safe Maine. And it started in Portland, and it involved using volunteers walking early morning hours around different places in Portland and counting how many bird strikes from the night before during bird migration. So I was down in the fall in Portland, and the person who works, Nick Lund, who is the spearhead for this project with Maine Audubon, took us on a tour around Portland and talked about some of the buildings that were kind of on the most wanted list for bird strikes. And one of the buildings that was one of the biggest culprits was the Memic Insurance Building. Just the way it was situated, I mean, a lot of glass on one side, but the way it was situated, the way the birds flew, there were lower buildings, and then there were some trees, and then their building came right up after the trees, so the way the birds came through, it was just set up perfect for them to smash into it. And they would find in a season hundreds of birds dead along that side of that building. So what they ended up doing is Nick approached them, and the head of Memic happened to be a birder, loved birds, didn't realize this was going on, and worked with Maine Audubon, and that whole side of the building got application of this window collision tape. And this is a specific brand called Feather Friendly, which has these little tiny squares that go onto windows and look like that. It's about every inch and a half and make like 3-inch squares. This is what it looks like once you put it on a window. From the outside, you can see it looks kind of whitish. From the inside, it's more translucent. So you don't see this when you're sitting in your living room, although you do see it from out, but the birds can see it. So they did the application on the side of that Memic building, and the next migratory season, the number went to 0. Wow. Amazing. Yeah, great. And the other thing that Nick has been doing, and again, I'm give him all the praises, is his project. A number of new buildings that have gone up in Portland, he worked with the architects and the owners of those buildings to install glass that's bird-friendly glass that comes, it doesn't have these dots on it. It's something they treat the glass in a certain way that doesn't reflect the light the way normal glass does. It's more expensive glass, but there have been some larger businesses that have built new buildings now that have installed that glass. So it's still a huge problem, but every little bit, that's the thing. So yeah, speaking of every little bit, I was talking earlier, I am a cat owner. My cat is an inside cat, and cats, 2.4 billion birds every year die because of domestic cats, right? So that's it's up there with the collision in the glass. So that's a huge deal. So cats are natural predators, right? So if we're drawing birds to like feeders around their home landscape and we have a cat that's sitting out on the lawn, we're kind of setting them up to be prey, and that's really not fair. So if you have a cat, cats do perfectly fine indoors. My cat is a happy cat. You can come to my house, prove it to you. She's very content indoors. So keep your cats indoors and do your birding outdoors. And so I want to kind of wrap up here with speaking of birding. We haven't really looked at too many birds yet, but I just want to rifle through some common birds that are around the feeders right now. Some of them are year-round birds that we've seen all winter long, like this cardinal. This is the male cardinal. Here's our chickadee. These guys are year-round birds. They do not do the migratory thing because they've decided they went the other way. They decided to stick it out here in winter. And if you think about it, this bird weighs it, like what did I say? It was about as much as a quarter weighs, right? To survive that, they have to eat all winter long to produce enough body heat to do that. And part of their strategy with that is in the fall, these guys are extra busy. They will cache seeds in the landscape, thousands of seeds, food store, so they will remember where they put them, which is amazing. So again, they don't need us to feed them, but they're built to survive. Nuthatches, lots of nuthatches here on MDI. That's a red-breasted nuthatch. That's a white-breasted nuthatch. Oops. I must have hit something that's making my slides go. Blue jays, a lot of people, is a bird they love to hate. So it's a bit of a bully bird. When it's at the feeder, it's the bird at the feeder. It's doing what it wants. It's taking what it wants. Everybody else is like, waiting for the bird to leave. So, but they're really resourceful birds. They're very clever birds. If you are out birding, you can be psyched out a lot if you're into bird calls. These guys are great mimics of other bird calls, especially some birds of prey. They can do calls in, and you think, oh, there's a sharp-shinned hawk there, but no, it's a blue jay. Dark-eyed junco. So these guys at the feeder, you'll see them on the ground often, and they like to feed there. This bird was actually right when I came in this evening, calling right out behind the library, tufted titmouse, calling. So these guys are in the same family as chickadees, but they're about twice the size. You wouldn't know. I mean, they don't really look twice the size, but in terms of weight, they're twice the size. They've expanded their range in Maine. So you can find them here year-round. You never used, like early 70s, you didn't used to see them here in the wintertime. Now you see them, they're common bird. Another common bird here in Maine, goldfinches. Love goldfinches. Or the kids at when we have a lot of kids and do a lot of kids programs, they like say these are the flying candies, or the flying bananas, they call them. Or they're so bright. The males are so bright yellow. They really capture the kids' attention. So. Another bird that started showing up at our feeders about a month ago are the red-winged blackbirds. Their distinctive call, you've probably been hearing that in the landscape. A more recent bird that I've just started seeing in our feeders is a pine warbler, one of the few warbler species that will actually come to the feeder. And this guy I've just started seeing over the past they happen again. The past 2 weeks is a phoebe, eastern phoebe. They don't come to the feeders as much, but they will. I have seen them occasionally at the feeder, but they like to be up high. You often see them making their phoebe call, and they do that tail flick thing, very distinctive. Sparrows. This is a song sparrow. A lot of people like to just say, "Oh, it's a little brown bird," and that's good enough, right? We have a number of sparrow species here in Maine. Song sparrows have pretty distinctive call. Another one that has a distinctive call, to me, it's the kind of the call of spring, is the white-throated sparrow, aptly named for its little white bib that it's wearing there under its chin. So The male, yeah, and the males have that yellow as well. And we talked about woodpeckers already, there's a little downy woodpecker, male downy woodpecker. We have a number of year-round woodpecker species here. This is a female hairy woodpecker. And I see both of these at the feeder. They're pretty common feeder birds. The one I don't see at the feeder is the pileated woodpecker. I actually have seen a pileated woodpecker at our feeder a few times, but they rarely come to the feeders. Another bird that's more common that we see as a year-round woodpecker is the red-bellied woodpecker. You may be wondering why it's called red-bellied woodpecker, because I see its head is red, but if you look on this slide and you look down here, you can see a little bit of red. So there's its red belly, or the red-bellied woodpecker. But I'm kind of winding down and this evening's chat with this red-bellied woodpecker because I think it's an example of something. And today, as you know, is Earth Day. So happy Earth Day, everybody. Yeah. So what does red-bellied woodpecker have to do with Earth Day? So if you look at this slide here, this shows 1950 along the eastern seaboard, the range of the red-bellied woodpecker. And if you look closely, I won't give it away, but you may want to look closely and see if you notice anything in that slide besides the red-bellied woodpeckers.
There aren't any in Maine.
Right, there aren't any in Maine. Okay, well, if you look at this slide, 2010, now you see red-bellied woodpeckers in Maine. But you may also notice that you see 2 red-bellied woodpeckers over here, and that doesn't mean there's twice as many red-bellied woodpeckers, but it does mean if you take a closer look at these red-bellied woodpeckers, does anyone see it now?
Size?
Size, okay, good, you see the size.
Oh, they're getting smaller everywhere else.
So, thank you, perfect, good observation. They're getting smaller. So there's this thing that I learned in my basic ecology 101 class way decades ago called the Bergman's rule that has to do with in a certain region within a broad just taxonomic group that population of species in colder environments tend to be larger. Now,
The body heat.
right, exactly, it's pure physics. So a larger body can retain more body heat. If you think about a deer, if you're a hunter, you may know this. If you go and hunt deer down in South Carolina and you take a buck there versus in Maine, on average, the buck in Maine is going to be much larger. And that has to do with this Bergman's rule. But it's a survival strategy for a colder climate. So getting back to this, here you have a larger woodpecker getting smaller and woodpeckers expanding their range into Maine. What is that telling us?
Climate change.
Exactly. The climate is changing. So we are warming, there's no doubt about it. If you look at the data in terms of the numbers of the climate, it is changing. And that the woodpeckers prove it, right? That's another piece of proof, yeah, a biological measurement, so to speak, of a warming climate. So, you know, what kind of things can we expect from our warming climate in the coming years? Well, obviously the air temperature is going to be warmer. The warm seasons will be longer and the cold seasons will be shorter. There'll be more precipitation that we have that falls as rain rather than snow. I mean, those of us that have been in Maine, I've been in Maine for over 30 years now. And, you know, and I'm an outdoors person, so I do winter sports as well as summer stuff. And my ability to do winter stuff has been over I'd say the past dozen years, much narrower now what I'm able to do in the winter than what I used to be able to do. So it's happening. Growing seasons get longer, so there's benefits to that too. These aren't just not negative things. They're all about change, right? Sea levels changing, oceans becoming more acidic. Okay, so what are some of the effects of that? So by increasing temperatures, we're basically changing the timing, or what we call the phenology of things like bloom dates and stuff. So birds that kind of time their arrival, their migratory arrival, and on their breeding grounds, they may miss peak food abundance, right? And that's going to impact their populations and their ability to raise their young, right? There was a paper that I read recently that Mass Audubon did that showed that 43% of the New England region's breeding bird species are classified as being highly vulnerable to climate change by the year 2050. So highly vulnerable is like the top warning, like that would be basically in peril. So that is a lot of bird species in our region that would be looking at having drastic changes in their population because of a warming climate. And I don't want to end there. It is Earth Day and it's a day to celebrate. And I don't mean to, don't want to end on a downer, because I feel like the message of this program really is about how just putting one native plant in the ground and, realizing that your home landscape is part of a bigger landscape is an important piece that you can do at home. And that's a positive thing, right? That should be a positive thing. Getting out and enjoying birds and learning more about birds, it's a positive thing. This is one of my favorite quotes from the wisdom of Dr. Seuss that I will also impart. And leave you in terms of, again, birds in your landscape, things that you can do. If you're not already into it, eBird is an app that you can get on your smartphone that you actually record species that you see. And if you don't know what you're seeing, the companion app called Merlin Bird ID will help you ID that bird either by its call or by its body. And this is actually real data that can be used by scientists to track populations of birds. So sitting in your kitchen table, looking out the window, and I see this bird, and you get in the habit of doing that every day, you're doing science, because your data is going into a bigger collection of data that's being used globally to find out what's going on. And it's just all about noticing. So just wanted to say thank you and keep noticing stuff. And maybe a couple minutes for questions?
Yeah, I've got maybe a couple minutes for me. 3 questions. I've got a couple comments online, so thank you for your patience. So we've got the microphone.
I just want a shopping list.
A shopping list.
Yeah.
Well,
Plans.
yeah, I would, so not to plug the shameless plug for MaineAudubon.org, but if you go to our website and go to the native plant finder, basically that's what it is, a shopping list. So you can shop at the same time, you can buy the plant. So yeah. So there are actually links on our website that will take you to some of the other ones that I mentioned. The National Wildlife Federation has that, and the Go Botany one. So those are all great ones. What's that?
Lilacs?
No, I don't think yeah, I was gonna say there might, no, yeah, sorry. Hard to say. I have one in my yard. So, it's one of the ones that was planted before I got there, and I ended up just leaving it there. It's not invasive, it's not aggressive, it can just stay in its own container, so to speak, yeah.
They were planted near the outhouse because for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
Oh.
the scent, yeah.
And so foundations, but they're not naughty, they're like, they're not, like butterfly bushes are gorgeous and they attract butterflies, but they're junk food for butterflies.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, really.
Question online?
Sure. Well, we have a couple comments. Let's see. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it. We had a comment earlier. Actually, it's a link that someone provided for us that the book that you mentioned before.
The Doug Tallamy book,
Yeah.
Bringing Nature Home.
Right. There's a Maine Calling.
Doug was on Maine Calling. Doug Tallamy was on Maine. He's not from Maine, but they had him. Yeah, it was great.
About
Yeah.
learning climate change.
Yeah.
And what we're doing right now is we're compiling all of as many as we can, all the things we just mentioned, the species and the links, and we'll send that to you in the follow-up email. If you haven't registered, you're welcome to go ahead and register. You can get back to it, or just email us as well, and we'll send you that, because we'll be posting this recording online.
Another good resource online is the Wildseed project. It's based in southern Maine. Many of you may know it. So it's also a good source for if you want to start plants from seed. That's another thing that a whole other thing I didn't mention. A lot of these plants, you can collect the seeds and you can sow the seed yourself. You don't have to buy anything, right? You can get seed from an aster plant or the goldenrod, and there's tutorials online. You could do this. All you have to do is make sure you're doing winter stratification or cold stratification, which means you actually sow the seed in a soil medium and you leave it out for a certain length of time in the cold climate, and that allows the seed in the spring to germinate. Without that cold hardening, it won't germinate. So anyway, that was an aside. You had another question.
That organization is really good for source of native
Native,
plants.
yeah.
They have really cute little booklets that are very easy to absorb,
Yeah, Wildseed project again, that's, yeah,
very good.
yeah,
Wildseed project, you said?
yeah.
Cattails, how about cattails?
Cattails, native plant, yeah. We have two species here in Maine, the narrow leaf cattail and the broadleaf cattail, the latifolia. I think the genus is latifolia. Sorry, I might be incorrect. One is, anyway, yeah, two different cattail species. Yeah, so,
And the property.
yeah. Yeah, another question on that?
Well, just to comment too, that the safflower apparently is an advantage to it because the squirrels don't like it.
What?
The squirrels don't like the safflower.
The safflower, remember I showed the different seeds and there was the not the sunflower, but the whitish ones. Yeah, the safflower. More expensive, but the squirrels. don't know.
The bears like.
Oh, because everything's more expensive now.
No, the larger fuzzy
I
things.
used a lot of safflower because it attracted the gardens
Yeah.
and the squirrels eat it now.
Oh, the squirrels now eat it. Okay, well, maybe they get habituated to it. We're good?
That's it for online.
All right, yeah, go. Yeah.
Your sanctuary in Bangor, and if you went there, are there trails? What would you see?
Yeah, so, great question. So the Fields Pond Sanctuary, is, if you're driving on 1A, before you get to Brewer, there's that chiropractic office on the left-hand side. Yes, if you make a left there, that's called the Copeland Hill Road, and then you make a right, the first right you can make at the stop sign is the Whizwell Road. And then you make a left onto the Fields Pond Road, and it's just like a mile down that road. So it's not far off it's a couple miles off the beaten trail off of 1A, and it's tucked back in there. Yeah, and we have about 2.5 miles of hiking trails, but our hiking trails connect to another local organization that is a conservation organization called Holden Land Trust, and they have hiking trails, and you can connect ours with theirs and spend the day hiking there. So it's a great place, and we do lots of programs. If you go on Maine Audubon website, you'll see the programs that the hikes and stuff that are led out of Fields Pond. This week we have, because it's school vacation week, we have camp. So there are lots of kiddos around this week, so yeah. We do a lot of work, and the spring season they'll be busy with school programs. We do a lot of stuff with the Bangor region, greater Bangor area with kids. Lots of kids go through there, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
5 native plants, at the Native Gardens in Blue Hill.
Oh, yes.
On May 31st, Saturday the 31st, from 9 until noon. There are going to be 9 this year. We had 7 the last couple of years, but 9 vendors of native plant growers in the state of Maine are coming to Blue Hill to sell their plants.
And if you haven't been to the Native Gardens at Blue Hill, make that, even if you don't go for the plant sale, make that a destination trip too, because it's the great work that you guys are doing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.